Hi and welcome to NUFC Matters. My name's Steve Rafe.
And I'm Malcolm MacDonald.
And I'm John Gibson.
Tonight's going to be a little bit different because obviously Newcastle United didn't play last weekend. We had that boring international break, which I don't think any Newcastle United fan enjoys at all.
Not at all.
So what we're going to do is we're going to be a little bit different. We are going to come to the Liverpool predictions a little bit later on. But tonight I think we're going to pick your brains and talk about the memories that you have about your career in football and your fantastic career as well in journalism. So Malcolm, let's start with you. Best game that you played in a black and white shirt for Newcastle?
Without any shadow of doubt for me, it was the fifth round of the FA Cup on our run to Wembley in '74, and we went to West Bromwich Albion. And the irony of it being such a great performance was that one of our best players got injured after just 3 or 4 minutes, and that was Terry Hibbett. And he had to go off, and Jimmy Smith came on, Jinky, and he just ran the show for 85 minutes and was absolutely brilliant. And I've experienced stinkers from Jinky, but this was quite the reverse. He was absolutely fantastic on the day, and everybody else sort of really joined in. Terry Mack and Tommy Casti and what have you, and the performance was absolutely superb all the way around the whole side. Some cracking goals, and I think I got the first one, and John Tudor got the second, and then Stuart Barraclough the third. So all three forwards scored, which is a sort of terrific thing. But it was all orchestrated by Jimmy Smith, and it was just a joy to play in. And I shall never forget John Weil. So many times in the game, he would just throw his arms up. He was the skipper and centre half of West Brom.
North East boy.
Yes, and he kept throwing his arms up in the air in utter despair.
Yeah.
Because West Brom had no answer, just no answer whatsoever to the football that was being played, and it was just a shame that poor old Terry Hibbett missed out on it all, and was sitting on the sidelines injured. But it was the most fluid football that I've ever been involved in. It was quite fantastic.
Greatest game that you've watched as a journalist, John?
Great question. I was at that game, and it was by far our best performance on the way to Wembley. We won every round away from home, but that was the round, as you rightly say, Malcolm. I mean, blimey, I've lived so long, I've seen the very few successes we've had in the last 50 odd years. I mean, I thought as a kid, when I was sitting in front of my Uncle Frank television set, little black and white postage job in the beginning of the 50s, watching Newcastle win the cup 3 times in 5 years. I thought it was always going to be like that. I thought, we're just going to go and win things. Then I come to cover Newcastle United in '66, back from Fleet Street, and the first thing we did in '69 was win a European trophy. I was also covering England, and my first time with England was '66 when they won a trophy. So I'm thinking, I've watched all that in the 50s, I've watched England win '66, Newcastle win '69. This is going to be some career, this. Here I am, 1 foot in the grave, 800 years later, and neither of them has won a thing since. Whether I'm a jinx or whether I'm privileged, because I actually saw it. The best games, I mean, you could pick a million out, and just fleetingly, I've always got to remember Rouge Pestosa away, because there's always that extra thing when you're away, winning on foreign soil. We're 2-0 down at half time, having won the first leg 3-0, so it's 3-2 on a knife edge. Absolutely brilliant second half. So that is a wonderful memory. Funny enough, the game after, a couple of games after, from what Malcolm was talking about, to go to Burnley in the semi-final of the Cup and 2 goals from him and
Hillsborough.
to go to the final was absolutely wonderful. And Barcelona, of course, in the Champions League was extra special for us. So it's been a long time. There's been a lot of rubbish. There's been lots of the Helford Uniteds, but there's also been Uzbekistan, there's also been Barcelona, which, and of course the entertainers. It was almost enjoyable to pick any of their games week by week until the end when the 12 points disappeared in a puff of smoke. But wonderful, wonderful times. But for unexpected, I guess for the end product, it was Uzbekistan. For unexpected, it was Barcelona.
Yeah, I can't see you going anywhere else with that because it was...
So to win a European trophy, Malcolm.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. And I go along to the reunions.
The Fairs Club things.
Yeah. And the players talk about the game, and it was and still is the absolute highlight of their life.
No question.
This is going to be a hard one for you then. Greatest goal that you scored in a black and white shirt. I'm sure a lot of fans have got their own particular favourites, but what's Malcolm MacDonald's favourite goal that he scored for Newcastle United?
There's a whole list.
Yeah.
There is, but there is one that really stands out in my memory, and every game these days is televised, and everything that happens in every single game, it's there on television and it's there forever. And of course it wasn't like that back in the 70s at all. There were great limitations on the television companies as to what games they could televise, and if you remember, Tyne Tees used to go around all of the clubs in the northeast. So right. Darlington would get as many shows on television as Newcastle or Sunderland.
Sure.
And this was one particular game that wasn't televised, so you had to be there to witness it. And
so none of you know the goal, so you can't dispute it.
And sadly, there's no record of it at all. But it was a match against Leicester, and what happened was, and I think we were already 1-0 up, and Leicester had a corner, and the ball was swung in, somebody knocked it out, and Irvin Nattrass suddenly got onto the ball, and he just started motoring out of the area, and he went straight up the inside right channel. And I had been back on the goal line, and Irvin set off, and I just went literally right in the middle of the pitch, the absolute centre line from goal to goal. And I was about, I suppose, 14, 15 yards behind Irvin. And the one thing I knew was that once he crossed the halfway line, his bottle would start to go.
He would twitch a little.
Yes.
He would twitch a little.
Yeah, because he was absolutely magnificent in his own half. But once he crossed the halfway line, I don't know, maybe he thought it was full of crocodiles. I'm really not sure. But he went over the halfway line.
Yeah.
And literally, and the situation was that they had just one player back. It was a midfield player back on the halfway line. Yeah. And so we finished up. We were 2 against 1, and so the guy was he was sort of pushing across and trying to close Irvin down and stop him advancing, but was also aware that I was steaming through the middle.
Right.
But and so Irvin, he got about he sort of went about 4 or 5 yards over the halfway line. Yeah. And he just knocked it square. And I was still coming like an express train straight through the middle. And it just so happened that ball and man met absolutely perfectly. really was utter perfection, and I remember, and it was, I think, back in the 70s, the great South African golfer,
Gary Player.
Gary Player. Gary Player. I remember him. He was doing a coaching thing on sort of Saturday morning television, and he got his driver out the bag, and he said, "Do you know?" He said, "I've hit more than 10,000 shots with this club, but I've only ever hit one perfect shot out of those 10,000." And I listened to him say that, and I thought, that was it. That was my 1 in 10,000. And it happened against Leicester.
Few others weren't bad, Malcolm. Eh? There you go.
But it ball and man just met absolutely perfectly, and I just hit it. And I was in the centre circle, and it just kept going and going, steadily rising, but it went like a rocket.
Yeah.
And the keeper dived, but he got nowhere near it at all. But it didn't hit right up in the corner or anything. It was just inside the post, but it was only 5 foot high. It wasn't sort of 7.5 feet, and it hit the net and was still going up. And it was like that Gary Player. I've hit that one perfect shot, and it was just absolute perfection.
The ball went in quicker, and that tail was told by you. 10 seconds it went boom, boom. I was there.
John, for you, favourite Malcolm goal and favourite other Newcastle player goal?
Yeah, favourite Malcolm goal, another one that perhaps wasn't seen so much, but yes, it was on television. You'll remember when I mentioned this. At Bolton from the throw-in, just on the halfway line. You know when you get a goal just before half-time, and then the whistle goes for half-time, and the whole crowd are buzzing, talking about the goal.
Yeah.
It happened with Malcolm's second one against Liverpool on your home debut, when he flashed the one in the top corner, and it happened with this one at Bolton.
Yeah.
The throw-in swung onto your right peg, I think.
Yes, it was Tommy Craig,
took
who was
the
on the
throw-in.
left. On the left
At
side,
Bolton, wasn't it?
Yes.
Sam Allardyce was centre half.
Yes, he was.
Siddle
with
was
a
in
lad
goal.
called Paul Jones.
And Barry Siddle was in goal.
Yes, he was. But Tommy Craig, we had tried this in training, and it was working, and so we put it into practice the week before, which was against West Ham at home, and I hit the bar with it. But so it was that close that we said, right, well, we've got to keep trying this to see if it'll come off. The idea being that Tom would look to be throwing it
down the line or whatever.
Yes, sort of, but onto my left foot where I would be coming round.
Yeah.
And it would onto my left foot because everybody knew I was left-footed. But what he did was he would dummy to there and then throw it that way, so that I having gone, would suddenly swing round the other way onto my right foot, and I would then literally volley it, and it went over the keeper. Siddle, Barry Siddle, dipped over him and underneath the bar.
Even better.
And afterwards, because that game it finished 3-3, didn't it? It was a very exciting game,
replay,
and it went to replay. The replay was a draw, if I remember.
Did we not win 1-0?
In the second replay.
Don't ask
I'm
me.
sure.
Because you're just a young boy. Anyway, let's not get into all that.
Okay, but it was televised. Was that game?
It was.
By the BBC, and Barry Davis was the commentator, and he interviewed me afterwards, and he said to me, he said, now coming on to your goal, he said, the volley. He said, what part of your shin did it come off? Ooh, yeah.
So that's your favourite Malcolm goal?
Yeah.
Goal by another Newcastle player in any era?
Great question. three would stand out. As a little boy, when you watch games and you're 8, 9, 10, you're starry-eyed, aren't you? And Jackie Milburn in the 51, when he went through from the halfway line against Blackpool, the great Blackpool side with Stanley Matthews, Mortis and the whole lot. And Jackie always said to me years later, that was the great, of the three Newcastle sides that won the FA Cup in the 50s, that was the best side. And it was a wonderful goal because he was quick, as Malcolm was, very, very quick. He ran from the halfway line. George Form, the goalkeeper, come out. He just struck the ball and turned round. He turned round before it went past Form. He knew it was going past and into the net. He just turned away.
Legend.
Wonderful. Asprilla against Barcelona when he jumped about 8'6" in the air to Keith Gillespie's cross.
And what a game.
I mean, we were sensational. We were 3 up and it was 3-2. And if it lasted another 10 minutes, we would have lost 4-3.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Yes.
And we won, and it was extra special. And bring you up to date a little bit more, of course, when you beat Man United 5-0, and you've got a centre half that's capable of chipping the best goalkeeper in the world, Schmeichel, the way Philip Albert did. Centre forwards couldn't do that. He was a centre half doing it, and that was a wonderful goal. And the amazing thing is about that, Steve, was that we beat them 5.
Yeah.
The next week, they went to Southampton and lost 6-3 Manchester United.
That was because of the grey shirt.
And won the title by 7 points, despite those two defeats. But the great goal out of the many from the entertainers' side has got to be Philip Albert when we're done Man U, because who it was against, both keeper and club, and the sheer audacity of it. Wonderful.
Good one. Go on.
Can I just follow on from what John was saying on one of your earlier goals that you mentioned there, Jackie Milburn? I was 6 years of age at primary school, which was just along the road from Fulham Football Ground, and on the Monday morning in assembly, the headmistress stood up and she said, now congratulations go to Fulham Football Club, our local club, who've got a very creditable one each draw up at St James's Park in Newcastle, and everybody look on the map to see where it is.
Bet they couldn't find it.
Yeah. And she said, and the replay is on Wednesday afternoon, kicking off at 2:00. And if anybody seriously wants to go to the game, then you come here for your lessons in the morning, have lunch, and then you can depart and go to the game.
No
Can
floodlights.
you imagine that happening these days?
Yeah.
With no
floodlights, so it was in the afternoon.
No floodlights, yeah. So it was an early afternoon kickoff because it was in January, and I was 6, and so
you didn't score a hat-trick.
And I was 6, and so I had lunch and I left the school and I went, and I'd been going for 2 years to watch football at Fulham, and I thought, it's going to be a real crush, is this? So I thought, I'm going to get into the enclosure. So I've got into the enclosure. So usually I went behind a goal. But this time I'm looking across from side to side. And it was a quite remarkable game. And when the plaque of Joe Harvey was erected
it's in James's.
At the Gallagher end.
Yes, at the Gallagher end.
By the first club,
I stood there chatting with Vic Keeble. Bless him, he's passed away now.
He was centre forward on that side.
He was centre forward on that side, and I related this to him, and he was fascinated, and he remembered it, and so I related the whole match to him as I remembered it, and he reckoned that I got 2 goals the wrong way round.
Right.
But how my memory goes of it, that Newcastle at half time were 4-0 ahead, and the second half was a fight back by Fulham, and they made it 4-1, and then 4-2, and then 4-3, got to 4-4, and it was into the dying minutes of the game, and Fulham had a corner which was cleared, and it went out to Jackie Milburn on the right wing, who just absolutely flew up the right wing, and he smacked across in sort of in Stuart Barraclough style. Stuart Barraclough crossed very similarly to Jackie. It was like a shot coming across. And Frank Keeble, who was, how would one say, a very basic footballer. Very
In other words, he
basic.
couldn't play. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. He was terrific in the air.
Yeah, he was somewhat agricultural.
Well, yeah, he couldn't play.
Yeah, but he was
effective.
brilliant
Yeah.
with his
He
head.
was effective.
Absolutely
Very
brilliant.
effective. Lovely
And
lad.
he literally just went like an aeroplane and just took off. And at the near post, he connected with this cross and just powered it into the net and made it 5-4.
Wow.
And to have the conversation with, and he was I think he was the only living, at the time, he was the only living survivor of
was.
that
Of
team.
the whole 50s.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He was. He was
Yeah,
only
and
living
lovely,
one.
great
Lovely
fella.
guy.
Yeah, and Londoner, of course.
Magic
and
man.
and
Well,
that
we don't
was-
hold that against him now.
No. But I'm saying, but back in the 50s, it was rare to find Londoners coming up here, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To the northeast, so we had a wonderful conversation about that. But of course, it was the first time that I'd actually seen the absolute power and might of the speed of Jackie Milburn.
Yeah.
And it was something to behold. It really was.
Next point for me is best player you played with at Newcastle.
There were a lot of very, very good players, but I have to talk, and I think on a very sort of selfish, personal view of this, and that would be Terry Hibbett, because the passing of Hibby, it was just manna from heaven for me. I always remember, because Terry Hibbett, he was very small, very slight, soaking wet. He didn't weigh 7.5 stone.
Yeah.
And I always remember Joe Harvey coming in one day before training, and he was mumbling and grumbling, and he was angry, and he was going, "Hello, son, and he's a bandit he is." And so I said, "Joe, what are you mumbling and going on about?" He said, "That bloody little Terry Hibbett." He said, "He's a bandit on the golf course, absolute bandit." and I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "I went out and played against him yesterday." He said, "And I play off 6, as you all know." He said, "And I'm a big hitter." He said, "And there's that little pipsqueak." He said, "It told me he was playing off 16, and so he's got shots off me on nearly every hole." And he said, and would you believe it? He said, about 7 stone of him. He said he outdrove me off every tee. He said he's a bandit, absolute bandit. Well, the thing is that it wasn't power or anything like that. With Terry Hibbett, it was absolute perfect timing.
Yeah.
And he could do it with a golf club. I would imagine he could do it with a cricket bat as well. But he could do it with his left peg.
Yeah.
And it was just perfect timing, and he could ping a ball. And I think that the semi-final goal against Burnley at the pass that he knocked for me to score, Colin Waldron completely misread it, because you look at a player like Terry Hibbett, little slight fella, and so Colin Waldron went forward because he thought that Terry Hibbett would never reach the kind of area that I was taking up. And of course I knew Terry, I knew what he could do, and I knew that he was going to knock it way beyond Colin Waldron and me. And Colin Waldron got absolutely stuck in that position, and so he realised it was going over in turn, and of course jumped on me back.
Yeah.
And so Hibby, he just had this wonderful ability not only to be able to strike it with absolute perfect timing, but he could also get into your timing as well.
Yeah.
So he understood his timing and everybody else's timing, and it was a joy to play with it. I played with two absolutely great passers of a ball in my career, and the first one was the England captain Johnny Haynes, and you didn't know which was his stronger foot, right or left. He could just do it two-footed, but Terry was all left-footed, but he was an equal to Hainesy.
Terry, for you then,
his passing.
Gibbo, for you as a journalist at Newcastle's
Great
Chronicle.
players.
Yeah, greatest players you've seen.
Well, taking the Supermac era out because he can deal with that. My two great players would be Peter Beardsley for sheer ability on the ball, absolutely staggering. He could make goals and score goals.
Yeah.
With that wonderful season with Andy Cole, when Andy Cole scored 41, he scored 24. Between them, they ran the whole show. He was quite staggering, and it's unbelievable to think that he was turned down in the way he was by Oxford in a assorted number of clubs and sent home in a hearse halfway back from having a trial in a hearse to pick up a train at Sheffield and come back on to Newcastle. It was only Bob Moncur seeing him and taking him into a friendly against Blue Star that got him up to Carlisle and started everything off.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the guy that's sitting on the Newcastle United goal-scoring record today, Alan Shearer, who was just phenomenal. Great goal scorer, has now been very lucky from being a schoolboy. I've seen three of the greatest at first hand and got to know them personally, which is Warjackie, Supermac and Alan Shearer. And Alan Shearer's got the goal-scoring record at Newcastle, and you can't take that away from him, and it'll take some getting back by anybody, because somebody's not going to stay there for 10, 12 years when they're at the very, very top anymore.
No.
Agents make certain you don't do that. And Alan Shearer, it wasn't that he went past six players and knocked it in the top corner. That wasn't, he was the English bulldog sort of centre forward. He was strong, he was powerful, he held people off, and he finished so well.
Yeah,
And
but he had a finesse about him.
Yeah, well, but he wasn't. He didn't do it in our spear. He did it in a different way.
Sure.
He didn't do Peter Beardsley with four shimmies that put everybody on their backside.
Yeah.
He did it in a much different way, but hugely effective. And they're my two.
Couple of questions off social media, off Facebook. Tony Sayers says, Malcolm, who did you support as a child growing up?
It was Fulham Football Club.
You supported Fulham?
Yes.
Great stuff. Michael?
Yeah, I saw my first game when I was 4 years of age.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah.
Michael Carr, he just chips in with his goals. He says Shearer versus Everton, Cisse versus Chelsea, Tiote versus Arsenal. Those are his favourite goals. Yeah. Thanks for your comments, Michael.
I never saw the Tiote goal.
No.
I was so horrified, and it was
He left. It was 4-0 off time.
down.
Left,
And said,
I stayed.
I can't cope with this.
Michael Holmes says,
home.
what's your opinion of the crap between Shearer and Owen? We did cover that on the last show, so if you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, you'll be able to see what I think and what Malcolm and John think about that. We weren't very impressed. Stephen Findlay says, Peter Beardsley was magical in his day. Yes, we agree. Got the shirt on. What did you think about Tino? I mean, he was just unpredictable, guys, wasn't he? Tino Asprilla.
Wacky is a box of frogs. Wonderful ability. Wonderful ability. You can understand why Kevin Keegan, who didn't mind about your baggage. Didn't matter how much baggage you would just get 3 taxis and put all your baggage in the taxis and come yourself. He didn't care about Asprilla's baggage and what he was like off the park, which was horrendous. But Tino at his best was Barcelona, and that's the memory that you always want to keep of him. A wonderful ability, but a maverick without a shadow of doubt.
Could you have played with him, Malcolm, or do you think he would have frustrated you, Tino?
I doubt I would have been able to have played with him. I think that we would have been going pretty much for the same thing.
Yeah.
You'd have to give you a ball each.
But I remember it was 1990, and I found myself driving from Switzerland into Italy, and I went into Milan. I had an appointment on the Monday, and on the Saturday, I was driving through, and you see the people walking along, and you know that they're heading for a stadium. You know, in just the way that they're going, wearing scarves
It gives you a
on a
clue
really
that,
hot day. Yeah, and I thought, oh wow. And then I saw a sign, San Siro, and I thought, well, I wonder whether it's AC Milan or Inter Milan that are playing, because they both play at the same stadium. And so I thought, oh, to hell, I'm not in a rush to go anywhere. So I thought, right, I'm going to find a parking space, follow the crowd, and I'm going to watch a game. So I got to the stadium, and I got a ticket at the end of the ground, up in the third tier. And oh my word, it was so hot.
Yeah.
But AC Milan were playing Parma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tina.
And I saw this incredible forward formation played in the most fantastic manner.
Yeah.
And it was Tino Asprilla as the point, the furthest point forward.
Yeah.
There was Thomas Brolin.
The Swede.
The Swede,
Yeah.
Swedish.
And
was it Gianfranco
and
Zola?
the Gianfranco Zola was playing, and they made this triangle as a forward line, and I just watched what was going on. And on the Sunday, I made a phone call to Newcastle United, and I said, whatever you do, go watch Parma and get Gianfranco Zola. Incredible footballer. Get Gianfranco Zola. And so they went, they watched, and they came back with Asprilla.
And shows the influence you have, I'll tell you that.
So thanks for taking notice of me, guys.
Great stuff. Couple more messages on Facebook. Brian Beresford says we need Super Mac now. We've also got Tony Carter. He says he was at the Watford game just gone. Newcastle's inability to retain possession against a team like Watford was worrying. We'll come on to that when we talk about the Liverpool game. Azzy Brown, he says Super Mac was as strong as an ox. He also asked you who was the hardest defender that you played against, and is there a defender you'd love to play against in the modern game?
All of them.
I presume he means hard in terms of the way they went about the game.
I think so, yeah. The hard man.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot who have got reputations. Tommy Smith and Norman Hunter and
Chopper Harris.
Yeah, Chopper Harris. But there is one in particular who was a fabulous footballer, but he really was hard as nails, but he was the one that was never dirty. And he was just hard. And it didn't matter whether he got absolutely smashed to pieces, he would still get up and plough on. And it was Roy McFarland, who I played with later.
Derby County player? Yeah.
England.
At Derby County. I played with him in the England side. And of course he was partnered by Colin Todd.
Yeah.
And the two of them made the most fantastic partnership. Roy McFarland's physical presence, his ability in the air, he could play on the deck as well. Colin Todd, who had the most incredible pace. He and I, we used to have so many sprint contests on a football field in the matches. And you could sort of sense the air being sucked out by the crowd at the side, and they just loved that sprint happening between us. And he was a lovely fella, Toddy.
Anybody you'd like to play against now? Anyone you'd fancy your chances against now, or anybody you'd like to pick your wits against? Is anybody who's a great defender?
I wouldn't mind taking it on just about anybody that's going at the moment. Yeah, because.
Did you see England in 3 against Kosovo?
I mean, judging on the international stuff, you could probably have a game against Harry Maguire.
I know. But also, you know, they don't seem to get the line right and what have you. And And I don't see centre forwards
Yeah.
working the line as we used to do, and if you remember John Tudor and I, that all the time we were movement, and you just don't see forwards doing it these days
No,
at all. And to be honest, I would really love to play in the modern game, because I think a bit of sheer pace and directness, I think it would shock them, absolutely shock them silly.
No, 100%. Let's look at the book that we have sitting in front of us here, the Gibbo Files, a book you wrote a few years ago, John. And you look, I suppose, at a lot of the managers that Newcastle United have had over the last few years. Do you want to take us through a few of the stories that you've got about the lads?
I mean, for me, Newcastle in my time have had 3 outstanding managers, without a shadow of a doubt. Joe Harvey, Kevin Keegan, and Bobby Robson.
Yeah.
Joe Harvey built 3 sides. He built the side that come up as the second division champions.
Yeah.
He built the side that won the European Face Cup, and then he built the 74 FA Cup final side. And the link between the 3 of them, the 3 managers, is that they were wonderful man managers.
Yeah.
All 3 handled players brilliantly and individually, and got the best out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Harvey was steeped in Newcastle United. His ability in the transfer market as well, Malcolm, I always thought was absolutely outstanding.
Yes.
He could see players. In those days, the managers unquestionably signed players. There was no chief executive like now, etc., etc.
Yep.
And he brought Malcolm MacDonald at 21, who had never played in the first division. He got Terry Abbott from Leeds Reserves. He got Terry McDermott from Bury, who went on to win all those European Cups with Liverpool. He got Tony Green. He just went out and got great player after great player in the way, much later, that Kevin Keegan did when Kevin Keegan built the Entertainers. Very different sorts of guys.
Yeah.
I mean, Harvey was a man's man. KK was a very emotional guy who would spit the dummy out regularly, and you had to give it a little rinse and stick it back in his mouth, and then off he went again. But I always felt, when he lost, he wanted to win the purest First Division Championship or Premier League title that was ever won. He didn't want to win it 1-0 to the Arsenal, the old Arsenal side, before Malcolm went there.
Yeah.
That once they were 1-0 up, they won 1-0. He didn't want to win the title that way. He wanted to win the title by scoring more goals than anyone else. And he almost did it. We forget that. He finished runners up to Manchester United. But when that 12 points went, I always thought a little bit of his heart went with that title.
Yeah.
And I don't think he left us halfway through the next season, and I don't think he was ever as great a manager again, either at club level with the likes of Fulham and Manchester
It leaves a
City,
massive scar
or with England.
on your brain.
He just didn't.
Losing those 12 points.
He couldn't look at it that I'd taken us so close that I'll make that one more step. It knocked his heart.
Yeah.
And of course, dear old Bobby. I mean, Bobby was absolutely wonderful. Came to us like Keegan when we were staying in relegation, like Joe Harvey when we were staying in relegation. And he built a side that went to 3rd top of the league and played in 2 group stages when they were that in the Champions League. Fabulous days. A crazy character. He could never remember anybody's name, as you well remember. Everybody just went under a different thing. He called Eric Gates. He called Sykes at Ipswich, but after Eric Sykes, and he was that sort of guy. But he had a massive heart, and if only he had followed Keegan, which was a possibility at the time, but instead we got Dalglish and went and then Wood Hullett and went rapidly down a different path, which was like taking a big sledgehammer and smashing a glass window. Great pity. If we could have only got Bobby, then we might be standing here with a totally different history and gone down a totally different path to the one we took. But a lot of the stories, and there was fun stories about those 3 managers, I mean, really funny stories. And the wonderful thing about covering Newcastle United wasn't just going to the matches and travelling with them. It's all the stories which at the time you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
The stories behind the scenes, the funny things that happened that reveal the person themselves. And that's something that I try to do in the Gibbo Files, putting them all together. And it's been quite well received as a fun book. And it's the reason I brought it along tonight, so any of our listeners and any of our people watching get a copy of it.
So if anybody wants to win a copy of that this week, the Gibbo Files, which is $9.99 and available from John himself, easy to contact via the Chronicle, we're going to give away a copy tonight, which is going to be signed by Gibbo and signed by Malcolm as well. All you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, NUFC Matters, and you just click subscribe, you're entered, and we will draw that next week when we do the show. So good luck. I hope you have a good chance of winning that book. It's a great book, well worth the read. Let's look ahead to the weekend then, guys. We've got Liverpool.
Spoil sport.
We've got Liverpool away at Anfield, live on television. How do you see it going, Malcolm?
I think Liverpool are the most dangerous side. They're more dangerous than Man City. Man City have immense strength at the back, in the middle, and up front. But there is just something about Liverpool, and it frightens me when I think of Newcastle and how they're actually going to cope with the electric movement that Liverpool suddenly create. Also, I have to say, I think they've got the best pair of fullbacks I have seen in a side for a very, very, very long time. And the right back, bless him, he's only a baby, isn't he? Still
Playing for England now.
Yeah, he's in the side, but still so young.
I think the only place we can compete with them at all is in goal, because their goalkeeper, their proper goalkeeper's out injured, and they've got the guy from West Ham.
So
and our goalkeeper's as good as that, or better than that, in my humble opinion. But that's the only position.
How are we going to set up? How is Steve Bruce going to set up? Is he going to go? Is he going to go on the offensive and try and take them down at Anfield? Is he going to set up a brick wall and try and defend?
Does it matter? Yes, Dan says yes. It does. Always been flipped there. It does, because you can't.
Yes, but I understand the point that you're making.
They'll still lose
because whatever setup you create, it's not going to work against Liverpool, because they've always got something that's much better that they're going to throw at you, and knock you down.
Maybe Steve, it'll tell us something, because we've got 4 points. The start is better than last season. There's a lot of things where we want to cling on to and say, isn't that wonderful? But really what we're clinging on to is one game. And that is beating Spurs, and that was sensational. It was wonderful, because if we take the other 3 games, Arsenal were very average up here, and we lost to a bad mistake. We went to Norwich and were absolutely horrendous, and Watford was like treading treacle the whole game.
Watford,
and
bottom of the table, and they made them look like stars.
They'd lost every game. They get a point up here and sack the manager straight afterwards. So, you know, that's how bad Watford were. So you take those 3 games, and if you look back, without at all being depressing, but if you look back at Spurs, I mean, they had struggled. They haven't had a season like at their fluid best.
No,
they struggled to beat Aston Villa the first time they played at home, just in the last 10 minutes. They got a terrific result at Man City, a wonderful result, but could easily have lost it, and should have lost it. The Zizou goal was off. And they were 2 up at Arsenal with 45 minutes to go and couldn't hold on to it. They're not... People say, oh, but we did well at Spurs, so maybe... There's the gulf between Spurs and Liverpool is absolutely ginormous.
It is.
And this side lost 1 game all last season in the Premier League, Liverpool. And they won the European Champions League.
Yeah.
They've won 13 Premier League games on the trot. That was the 13th win the last time out at Burnley.
Yeah.
They've got the best centre-half in Europe. He's just been voted European Player of the Year. They've got three up front.
Ahead of Ronaldo and Messi. And,
the three up front could have run the Valentine's Day massacre. And we haven't mentioned the full-backs that he mentioned or the midfielders, etc. They are genuinely a frightening side. And at Anfield, I really can't see it. And
they're brilliantly led, aren't they?
Oh,
Klopp. I think
of course.
He's
he's terrific. I mean, to be truthful, it's a game where you say, let us keep our discipline, let us keep our honour, let us not be humiliated.
Yeah.
And then we'll play the real match that matters, Brighton, the following week.
Come on then, let's have a prediction.
I would go for 2-0. We'll lose, but I worry that it would be 3-0.
I'm going to double it. I'm going to go 4. I really think that Liverpool will just absolutely muller Newcastle.
Oh well, that's something for to spoil me Saturday lunch.
I'm sorry about that, John.
I'm going to go for 3-1 to Liverpool.
Right.
I can't see Newcastle winning. I can see them scoring bizarrely.
I was going to say it will be bizarrely,
but it's 25-1 at the moment at the bookies for Newcastle to win, so it's worth the daft quid.
No, it's not. It's only worth the daft quid if they actually win. It's not. I mean, it's like putting money on a lame horse blasted against the Derby winner. It's got a chance if the Derby winner falls down. I mean, I'm not having a go at Newcastle at all. My heart is with them desperately, and I desperately want them to do something, regardless of who's running the club or whatever. I just think this is a match when they don't. And in a way, I fear Liverpool more than I would fear Man City against Newcastle.
Yeah,
in a way I do.
I couldn't agree more. And there is something about Anfield. It is so difficult.
We've won 3 times at Anfield since the Second World War finished in 1945. And here's a fact: one of the times we won, we won 2-1. A Brazilian centre forward scored the goal.
Mirandina.
May it be Joe Linton scoring the winner this Sunday. We won 2-1 at Anfield.
Yeah.
And a week later, one match later, the Newcastle manager got the sack.
We lost 3-0. Do we not lose 3-0
at home? We lose 3-0 at home to Coventry.
That's
and
right.
he got the sack. And it was Willie McFall, who had been at the club for 22 years, having come in 1966 as a player from Lingfield, stayed on after a wonderful playing career, was a coach, assistant manager, and 88, 22 years later, he got the sack. The day he got the Newcastle United job, senior job, not the reserve team coach, I gave him a bell and I said, Willie, how are you doing? I says, congratulations on getting the Newcastle job. You're one day nearer with the sack. He says, thanks very much, Gibbo. I said, if you get the Newcastle United job, you're going to get the sack. And unfortunately, bless his cotton socks, he did. So I'm not suggesting that we are going to beat Liverpool and Steve Bruce is going to get the sack 1 week later, but isn't it ironic that one of the greatest servants we ever had won at Liverpool, which is a complete rarity, and then he got the tin tack. But there we go. I would settle for winning at Liverpool on Saturday and seeing what happens at the other end, but I think the pink pig is just thrown past you.
Great stuff as always, lads. Thanks for joining us, and thank you to everybody who watches NUFC Matters. Don't forget to enter the competition. Simply subscribe to NUFC Matters on YouTube, and you could win the Gibbo file signed by Super Mac and by John Gibson. Tonight we're going to play out with Sherry Holly, who was playing in Dunstan, of all places, last week. She is the niece of Buddy Holly, and a band called the Baldy Holly Band. So they're going to play us out tonight, which is a little treat for everybody. We'll be back next week. Thanks very much for joining. Good night.
Good night.